Today, we're going to discuss the build to rent model. Build to rent, also known as BTR, is an emerging trend that has been gaining significant traction in recent years. It involves the construction of purpose-built residential properties with the sole intention of renting them out to tenants rather than selling them as individual units. This innovative approach to housing offers numerous advantages for both investors and tenants alike. And here to discuss the BTR model is Bethany Finch of American Made Home Solutions. Bethany, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Brian, for having me. I sure appreciate being here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started investing in the build to rent model.
We've been in business about 27 years, mostly in multifamily. And my husband literally worked his way from the ground up as a groundskeeper all the way to owning apartments. At one point, had over 5,000 units, all under full-blown renovations, all across a very large portfolio. And just like everything, you kind of wax and wane depending on the markets. Okay, time to sell, time to repurchase, all of that. And then I've always been on the business side of things. So I'm the one out there building the businesses and launching all of those. So when I launched more of another brand of our business, he's like, oh no, you need to do single family. So I either did a tremendous job showing him how much harder single family is, because he did one flip and said, wait, why are we doing single family again? After he made me do it for years. So at that point, he was ready to go back to multifamily and build that part of it out. And in doing so, COVID was happening. So on top of building and extending and kind of shifting and pivoting, COVID happened. And it's like, what's going to happen now? And what do we do? And as Christians, we have focused heavily on, okay, Lord, what does our country need? What does our markets need? American Made Home Solutions exists to create sustainable growth. So we don't want to just go in and do one thing and be done. We just don't want to do one multifamily and be done. We want to be there for a long time. So we went and hit the road in 2020, went 100% remote, and we went to all of our markets, even when airlines and everybody said, nope. We went in an RV and we drove to all of our teams. And the housing crisis was tragic then. It was even further tragic after, because COVID shut down workforce housing, and that's all we focus on. So my partners and I, as we continued to pray and talk through these challenges, we actually launched our build to rent model in 2020. So because we all have about 25 plus years experience, each one of us said, okay, mitigate risk, right? Because who knew what was happening in COVID? So at that point, the first model we built was slightly different than models 2 and 3, right? Because we wanted to have a lot of flexibility and wanted to still meet the needs and demands, but also deal with the unknown of COVID. So that's what really launched us in there, was recognizing the huge deficit in workforce housing that was only expansiated by COVID. And then now the government is just constantly flooding, look, do anything, just get us more housing. We need this. So it's a huge way for us to get it out there quicker.
So you see build to rent, the model build to rent, as a solution to providing more workforce housing, solving the housing crisis. Explain that a little bit more. Like why build to rent and not apartments or just building more single family? What's different about build to rent?
Ways to describe it is build to rent is horizontal multifamily. So we're building very large communities of single family homes, townhomes, duplexes, up to fourplexes, but they're all rentals. And we own the entire community. So it acts, looks, and feels like multifamily to the lenders, but to the consumer, the tenants, it's their own individual house. They don't have people above them. They don't have, they're not fighting over parking spaces. They don't listen to their neighbors. A lot of them will have yards. So it feels like a home to them. They get all the benefits of a home, only they don't have to take care of the yard and all those things that normally accomplish the home ownership side of things. They're not paying the taxes. They're just paying rent to us. And
it's kind of like having detached townhomes or condos. Is that kind of the thought?
So the first project was 100 single family homes, all detached. None of them are connected in any way. The second project, the city of Mobile, Alabama, we're just outside in Foley. They wanted it to be all on a PUD. So at that point, they wanted to see some townhomes. So we have some connected townhomes, but the rest of them are all single family, detached units. And then the third is 241 units, is a mix. Single family, detached, connected townhomes, some I guess the townhomes would be considered like the duplexes or the triplexes, but
Well, Alabama, they wanted you on a PUD. Explain what a PUD is to our listeners.
so a PUD is where the entire parcel is all one unit. You cannot like break out individual tax parcels. So for instance, on our very first project that we built, the 100 unit, what we did there is we literally kept them on individual parcels. So in COVID, if things went crazy and we needed more capital, we could just sell off a couple of parcels. And so just sell those homes and recap that capital, and it's no big deal. What they said is, no, we need it to be a PUD, which is this fancy terminology basically to say it's all one tax parcel. It's bought and sold together. You cannot individually break this up. It's all together, and it falls under just a slightly different code. That's the extent of it in a nutshell.
To solidify it even more and put it in context, like the difference between, say, a detached condo, townhome, and a build to rent is what? I mean, can you still sell off the build to rent if it's not on a PUD and it's on separate tax parcels, or is it only for renting out?
100% yes to all of those. So yes, depending on how you build it. So the build to rent model is such that we own all of them. Now, whether they're separate parcels or not separate parcels doesn't change it. You're building with the mindset of renting all of them. Okay. So that's why the lenders and the banks and everybody looks at it like multifamily. In regards to whether or not we could sell them, for instance, our first one is individually parcelized, right? So we have individual tax parcels. We could sell off them each individual ones. We could sell off none of them. We could keep them all together. The third one that's 241 units, but it only has like 65 parcels. So we wouldn't necessarily be able to sell off all of them individually, right? We could only sell off certain sections and things. Where the second one has no individual parcels, we couldn't sell any of them. It's all grouped together. So in our situation, again, we're always trying to build in contingencies, because the difference is when I go to build a multifamily project, I'm going to build a 100-unit building. I have to wait for that entire building to be signed off and inspected before I can get my certificate of occupancy and put a tenant in there. So I have to wait clear till the end. With us building single family homes, the moment I get one home done, I can put tenants in. So I immediately grasp that capital that's coming back in, but also meet the needs of the housing community on a much quicker scale.
That makes sense. And that's very true, because I'm trying to get a certificate of occupancy in an apartment building right now. So,
you know how long it's been.
What's the economics of building build to rent? I mean, because I'm trying to figure out how it makes sense as an investment if you're essentially building detached homes, but renting them out to workforce housing. Where's the profit margin coming from there?
Profit margin is actually coming from multiple standards. So for instance, you're building multifamily. You can't put a tenant in there till you're all the way done. You have no rents coming in until that happens, right? So you probably have a 12, maybe 18-month build out, and you're not collecting any rents. So for the investor, it's just accruing, right? And then when you get it all fully stabilized, you can start putting tenants in, then you can either refinance it or sell it. The same is true for us, except for we're collecting rents right away. So we're collecting capital right away. There's more opportunity for cash flow sooner. A single family home goes up much faster than a multifamily 100-unit building, right? The biggest part of this is building out that infrastructure, right? We had to get all of the horizontal, all of the power lines, all of that. But once that's down, the homes themselves go up considerably faster. So the investor makes money on cash flow faster. They also make money because, again, once we're stabilized, we're going to refinance or sell the same thing, just like a regular multifamily. So they're going to still have that as well. But in our situations, because we want to stay in key markets and we're very, very picky about what we're doing and where we're doing it and how we're doing it, we'll actually be refinancing a lot of these. So there's an opportunity for long-term wealth, not just because you get a big chunk all at once, but because you're going to have long-term cash flowing, your principal's returned to you early on. And then we refinance the property, and now you're just collecting cash flow every single month. Not a bad deal, when you think about it from that perspective. And because they're brand new construction, You don't have the maintenance, the upkeep. You don't have a lot of the things that on a value add multifamily Class C property you'd be dealing with.
What do you look for in a community? Like where would you build to rent and where would you not build to rent?
We do not build to rent in non-landlord friendly states. So Washington State is home state for me, and we're not building here. we pretty much only build in states we are willing to keep properties in, because again, we don't want to go in and do something and be done. We want to be able to keep it. So with that same concept in mind, we're also not urban. We are not focused on downtown urban, high rises and things like that. Why? Because we're focused on workforce housing. So when a market the demand for the rentals is great, people are pushing out and pushing out and pushing out just to afford where they can live and still not necessarily have to be crammed into a skyrise with their dog and their 3 kids and everything. So we're mostly in those secondary and tertiary markets outside of where the need is great. So strong rental markets that are already very, very strong. And we're in that path of progress because we're working with cities. We're working to develop and grow areas that are desperate for growth, and they need us to come in.
Do cities understand why they need you to come in?
Oh, yeah. They're actually the ones approaching us. One of them even lifted a building moratorium to get us in, had a special meeting, got us in, had another meeting, got everything approved, and then immediately put the building moratorium right back in place as soon as we were in. So they actually came to us recognizing the value and the need.
Because a lot of times developers like yourself run into a lot of NIMBYism and people who don't want you there. Have you successfully been able to kind of sidestep that, or if you had to deal with that directly?
Well, yes and no. Usually when you see that, it's in areas where they either already have a lot of it. Most people don't look ahead. You don't want to be looking in an area and just go, oh, we need more housing here, and then just decide you're going to go build. You want to be looking at their master plans. How many projects do they already have in the works? When are those going to hit the market? When is yours going to potentially hit the market? So if they already know this, they're thinking about that, and they already know they're going to have 20,000 units in the next 2 years. They don't want to add another one. They'll push you out. So if you stop and you really look at the long game with the short game in mind, you have a better chance of getting their approval because you're coming alongside them to meet a need. If they don't have a need, why are you there? A lot of people just want to be there because that's my hometown, or, oh, I like this area, or whatever.
Let's talk about cost controls, because I'd imagine as you're building these developments, you have to look at the cost of land and then your cost per square foot to build. Kind of take us through that process, how you review those numbers.
Thankfully, we have builders that have been in these areas for a very long time. So they already know their numbers. So in this situation, the difference between just building single family home and building out large communities like this, they're able to purchase at cost at a much larger scale. And so that enables a much bigger discount on the build side of things. It also enables when the city wants you there, and you're looking to purchase land, you suddenly can start negotiating things, whether it's impact fees or tax discounts or things like this. It's really trying to get them to understand, look, you're not the ones in charge. We're a team and we're working together. So let's have these conversations. So coming at it from that perspective, instead of, the city's in charge or the bank is in charge. We literally just fired a $10 million lender just because they've literally cost us over $1 million and over 6.5 months of delays. And that's not a team player. So recognizing that the team has to have the whole vision. Otherwise, one member, right? Say our septic guy that was coming in to build our septic system, maybe he put us on the back burner and kept putting us on the back burner and back burner and back. Well, all those delays cost everybody else. So that's not really a team player. That's only them looking out for them. So if they're not a team player, then we need to find others. And so for us, it's really working on those relationships and establishing good relationships and passing that vision on. Do you really understand what we're doing? Because if you don't, you probably need to find a different team. Sometimes you always have contractors that are, at the end of the day, they're just going to look out for themselves. So you have to keep accountability measures in place and you have to write your contracts accordingly. So if a contractor has to start paying me to show up to my job site because they're not following the contract we agreed to, well, generally they get the message. But we have to have stiffer contracts, right? We have to do things a certain way. We have to kind of really not just put accountability measures in place, but have our oversight in place as well.
If you're looking to do a build to rent, how many acres do you need? Yeah. What's the typical ballpark cost to purchase the land? And then how many units do you feel you need to get on that land in order to make things pencil out?
The reality is it depends, right? Land prices are different in every single market and every single location. Some places already have power or water, fairly close. Others you're bringing, like we had to build an entire sewer treatment plant on one of ours, so those costs are all different. In our very first 100-unit project, we try not to go below 100 unit. We try to stay about 150. It can still pencil in certain areas, but it really depends. So we try to stay at 100 or above. And that was only 11 acres. So different sites, how they're laid out, how much usable land there is there wetlands, things like that, determine that land, that space, how much you're going to actually need. In regards to the actual build out costs, again, different markets, right? My contractors in Mobile, Alabama cost me a whole lot more than my contractors in Lafayette, Louisiana, right? So different markets have different costs and variabilities along those way. And so those are things that always have to be factored in. So when we're looking at a project, we're looking at how close is it to the work, right? Where we're at in all of ours, we're right along that I-10 corridor. So we're very close to all the oil and gas. We're very close to all the education. We're very close to the major employers in the area. Then we're looking at, okay, how long is this land in what shape, right? Is this completely raw? Am I going to have to bring and do everything? Or is there water 10 feet from my site that I can just tap into? Things like this. How long is that going to take? Is the city want to work with us? Or are they going to dig in their heels, kicking and screaming? Right? A lot of those are factors that we're looking at. So when we're looking at it, it's very much a holistic approach. It's not just, oh, here's a piece of land. It doesn't just go like that. It may start that way. It definitely doesn't get past the 5-minute mark at that point.
Let's kind of transition to the operational side. So once you have them built out and people are living there, are you still involved at that point? Do you hand it off to a management company or are you overseeing the management company?
Well, we are overseeing the management company and we have management companies in from the beginning because remember, we can get houses built right away. So some of the projects are in such a way that we could build houses before we had the infrastructure done because they were on a separate part of the parcel and there was already water in that area. So like some of our projects, we had 8 houses built before we even had the infrastructure done on the other part. So we bring in management as soon as it makes sense. On with some of our other projects where we have to build 100% everything out, management will come alongside so that they can start doing pre-leasing and things like that about 6 months before. And we're overseeing every aspect of that. Although it's a typical multifamily property manager, they have to have a little bit of an understanding of single family because the people that are looking for that is different than those that are looking to live in an apartment.
How so? What's the difference there?
Oftentimes, the difference with those that are willing to live in apartments, it's usually a little bit less expensive. They usually don't have to come up with as much money down. And they're usually not necessarily a lot of apartments, they won't have to pay for their trash and their sewer and their this and that. They'll just have to pay for electricity. Where if they're living in a single family house, that landlord expects them to pay for everything. So it's usually those people that are looking for single family houses, they can afford a little bit more. And that's why they're looking at that.
What kind of amenities are you building into these communities? I mean, they're workforce. You said they're workforce housing. So I'm wondering, do they have pool houses, community rooms, or is that for maybe a higher tier or a different economic strata?
No, we 100% build amenities into these. So our very first 100-unit has dog park, has walking trails. It's a gated community. Many of them will have valet trash. The other units will have pools. They'll have full clubhouses and game rooms. They'll have exercise facilities. It'll look and feel like an apartment community. They'll have outdoor barbecue areas, all of that. It'll be a community. It won't feel like individual homes. It'll feel like a community because it'll operate like a community.
So when it comes to build to rent, what should I be asking you? What haven't I asked you that as a talking point that you usually hit on?
Why would somebody invest in build to rent over multifamily right now?
A good question. Go ahead and answer it, please.
The biggest reason many folks who invested into multifamily last year are either dealing with capital calls or they're dealing with, little to no cash flow. And the reason is because what I would call the low hanging fruit. You're dealing with a ton of operators out there, all going after the same thing, value add, and they're buying it pretty much at retail. There was very little discounting going on. They didn't have to work that hard, so they didn't. And then when interest rates changed and insurance rates changed, it cost them heavily. And so teams that weren't experienced enough didn't have enough contingency reserves built in. And so in build to rent, all of our team, each member has 25 plus years experience. So we built in a lot of contingencies, right? We were buying rate caps when nobody else was because of what we know. We've been through multiple market cycles. We know, okay, we don't want to put this product out there then. We want to put it out here because if we put it out here and we get it at that price, then when we try to stabilize, we're locked in at that lower price. And as you know, multifamily, it's all based on the income being brought in. And if we've got a tenant in there locked in at 1,300 when we could be collecting 1,700, things like that, we're looking at that long game refinance option, and we're keeping that all in mind. So folks, we have control over that. We're somebody who's doing a multifamily value add. They're just trying to get heads on beds as fast as they can.
Do you have any pricing advantage when it comes to insurance, or are you in the same boat as regular multifamily?
Yes and no. So yes, because early on, right, for that first year, year and a half during the build out, the insurance, how do you insure land? Right? You don't have buildings that you're insuring, right? So you have that year to 2 years of buffer time. Then once your houses go up, well, then you don't have to insure 100 houses. You insure one house until the next one's done, and this one, right? So insurance wise, it's kind of a build up instead of all at once. And then like many of my Florida properties, those multifamily insurance rates got doubled this last year.
And then just to put it in the kind of the global perspective, getting back to the idea of the housing crisis and the fact that you're building workforce housing, what's the bigger picture for you? Or is that and the motivator? Is it to build workforce housing and help solve the crisis? Kind of put it in perspective for us as far as what your bigger vision, your bigger goal is.
So one of the biggest things is, they're saying that the middle class is disappearing. Well, why is the middle class disappearing? The middle class is disappearing because nobody is teaching the middle class how to think anymore. So back in the day when we were in school, we actually used to learn how to think for ourselves and it was praised. Now that's not the case. So what's happened is people don't know how to invest and they don't know what to invest. And they're trusting some stranger who's going to push a button on a computer, who's not going to engage their brain, who's not going to think through them and their scenario and what's best or not best for them, what their risk tolerance is. They're only going to deal with their own product. So what we're focused on is really empowering Americans, and we have a lot of Canadians as well now, so that they can actually make smarter investments. And in doing so, recognize you see a need, you fill a need. Right? We have a housing crisis need. Let's fill that need. That's going to go on for a long time. We can ride that one for a long time and still make very, very good money. But in the same token, just like crypto, right? What's it, 4-year thing? And now it's dead. So you're not going to deal with that. At the end of the day, people always need a place to live. So there's always value there. It's also a hard asset, things that people can touch. So for us, it's an opportunity to not just empower people into making smart investment choices, but if you as an investor make a much better return at a much safer mitigated risk, investment, and you get a whole bunch of capital back, well, you're going to turn around and you're going to rinse and repeat. Well, that's creating sustainable growth. That's our mission, right? Is to do that. And the more you do that, and then the more the next investor does it, and the more our other investors do it, now our entire country starts doing better and better and better. And that middle class starts coming back and people start feeling better and not like, oh, the bank runs the world, and because they're learning how to be the banks. So for us, it's really pushing that.
Bethany, how do people find out more about you and or get a hold of you?
So the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn. They can look me up, Bethany Finch, or they can look me up as American Made Home Solutions, either one, and reach out to us. I do have a free Build to Rent ebook. If your listeners would like it, I'd be happy to share that link with you, and you can give that to them so that they can download that and understand a little bit more about build to rent and what risks and pros and cons for it they might be interested in.
The last question is, what's your favorite hack or app?
Building business credit. Many entrepreneurs don't do that soon enough. And even in the multifamily, they don't do it on their own properties. And if they built out business credit sooner, it would actually save them all along the way. They wouldn't even need to do capital calls sometimes.
Thanks, Bethany, for coming on the show today and talking about the build to rent model. You shared a lot of great insight and detail into how you're making it work for you and also solving kind of our housing crisis in the process. So thank you so much for having this conversation with us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thank you so much, Brian. I sure appreciate being here. I hope your listeners found value in what I brought today.